Hi and welcome to this video where I show you how I color this festive double page in Hanna Karlzon's season. It's the best to watch until the end, because I encountered some issues with the bouquet background, and this way you can avoid the mistakes I made. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Ina. If not, welcome back. I wanted to create a bouquet effect in the background. And actually, it would have made more sense to use colored pencils, since there are lots of tiny gaps between the pine branches and the individual pine needles. Colored pencils would have been great for this, but I simply don't have the patience to color this large area in the middle entirely with pencils. That's why I decided to use my Jackson watercolor crayons. I don't have the full set, and in general the range is smaller than that of the Neocolor II, so I had to work with the colors I have. I chose cobalt green, deep green, cadmium green, and a light blue from Herlitz. I show you a gradient I tested on a scrap piece of paper to see if the colors blend well. I can already tell you that it didn't look as good in the coloring book as it did on the scrap paper. My plan was to gradually lighten the color from the top corners towards the lower center. Since I'm working with a kind of watercolors and you can't paint lighter colors over darker ones, I start with the lightest color. First, I create the bouquet circles in the area where the second lightest color will be. I also add partial circles here and there, behind objects or at the page edges. Next, I color the lower area completely with the lightest color. And I also color over the dots which are already on the page. I can easily color over them with a gel or acrylic paint pen over them later. Then I use cadmium green to create circles in the next darker area, before filling the lower section around the light blue circles. And here's a tip, use more circles than I did. It looks more realistic, and let some of them overlap. I did that in a few places, but in the end, it's hardly noticeable. Another tip I followed is to vary the circle sizes. Now I'm using deep green and repeating the same process. Finally, I fill the top section with cobalt green. If you have masking fluid, which I don't, you could protect the entire pine branches and ornaments from the color. But it's a lot of work to all the small details. I always try to let the different colors overlap slightly to achieve a better gradient later on. Okay, I'm done with that now, and it took about 40 minutes. It really doesn't look good yet, and it will take some more time until it improves. I now have a glass of water and a cloth to dab off excess color from the brush. Now I'm blending the crayons with water. I work from light to dark, and since I prefer to work from the top to bottom, I'm turning the book around. I always try to blur the edges of the circle slightly to get a softer transition. This took quite some time, and I wasn't really satisfied with the result. I then colored the other side in the same way. After finishing that, I used the wax pastels on the rough side of this plastic sheet, picked up the color with a brush to add a second layer across the entire page, and used a small brush to fill in all the tiny gaps. I missed a few areas, but I colored them in at the end. I've also started a bit on the second page. This could also be done well with a water tank brush, but mine is already too frayed, so I wouldn't be able to reach the small gaps with it anymore. I tried to blend the color transitions as smoothly as possible, so there are no harsh lines. In small areas between the pine needles, the color can be applied very opaque and evenly. But the larger the areas become, the harder it is to achieve full, even coverage. In the comments of an older video, I also received the tip to use a colorless alcohol marker instead of a brush and water. I tried that, but I have to say I prefer using a brush and water. Here you can see how I create the transition to light blue, and then I'll finish the rest quickly off camera, because I don't want to bore you. So, now the background of both pages are pretty much done, and I actually wanted to add more circles with a white colored pencil. However, I noticed that the white pencil doesn't really show up well here, and you can barely see anything. That's why I decided to use white acrylic paint, which I diluted a bit with water, so it's not completely opaque. This time I used circle stencils in different sizes. I originally thought I could just draw circles with a white colored pencil all over, and the colors underneath would show through, matching the colors below. But that's how it goes. Plans don't always work out. In general, it's not that easy to achieve a bokeh effect that looks truly realistic. If there were a string of lights on the pine branches, you could add yellowish circles in the background to represent distant lights, but that's not the case here. Now I'm using some metallic watercolors from Nassau Fine Art, adding splashes of color in various shades. For this I'm using these three tones, a darker green, turquoise and a very light shade. Naturally, some splatters will land on the motifs that still need to be colored, but I don't mind that too much. At this point, I'm not really satisfied with the background, but I wanted to finish coloring the rest to see if it will even stand out that much in the end. After that, I let everything dry and then continued with the pine branches. So far in this book, I've always used the Castle Art Soft Touch pencils, but this time I wanted to try the gold ones. For the pine branches I used cadmium green, leaf green, pale green and leaf green light. The pine needles become lighter from the center of the branch towards the tips. I also noticed that I forgot to blend the grains in a few spots. I've now finished this one branch, and to spare you from watching me color 1,000 pine needles, I quickly finished the rest off camera. So now all the pine branches are colored, and I'm moving on to the cute little mice. I'll start with their tiny paws and the inner part of their ears, using Coral Deep and Pink Bloom. I'm doing this for all 3 mice right away, and I also color their noses pink. I want each mouse to look different to add some variety to the page. For the eyes, I'll use permanent brown. I noticed that what should actually be the pupil is crescent shaped, so it might also represent the highlight in the eye. That's why I leave it white at first to see how it looks. Okay, it looks a bit creepy, so I fill it in with ivory black as a pupil and later add a white highlight spot. The eyes still look a bit lifeless, but the highlight will change that in the end. I've started with this mouse here, which will be gray-brown. I begin with the darkest color, slate gray. The belly will be white, and the back will be the darkest part of the body. To create the impression that the legs are round, they get lighter from the outside in. I'll do the mice jewelry at the end, along with the ornaments. The next color I'm using is blue-gray, followed by graphite light. I also use a bit of this color in the ears to create a smooth transition. For the belly, I'm using titanium white, and down by the paws, I'm adding some gray for shading. And the first mouse is done. Moving on to the mouse at the bottom, which will be light brown beige. I'll start with yellow ochre as the darkest shade. Then comes terracotta light, followed by Naples yellow, and the lightest color will be cadmium orange light. Now onto mouse number 3. This little one will be spotted. For the brown spots, I'm using burnt umber with a bit of charcoal gray for blending. I placed the spots randomly. Apart from the spots, the mouse will be white. I'm using titanium white for that and dove gray for shading. Normally, I add highlights at the end, but since the mice look a bit spooky right now, I give them their eye highlights immediately. I'm using the white Sakura gel pen for this. As I mentioned, the pupils look like crescents, so I will place the highlight in the open part of the crescent. I think the mice already look really cute now. Next, I color the candy canes. For the white stripes, I'm using dove gray and titanium white again. The red stripes are made up of more than 2 colors. The darkest color is cherry pink, followed by red ochre, Venetian red, and peach. I really like how this looks so far. So I quickly finish the others and think about which color to use for the bow. Alright, these two candy canes are now completely colored, including the bow. And now I'll show you how I colored them. I'm using terracotta light, cadmium yellow, golden yellow, and Naples yellow light. I used these to create a golden tone for the bow. I approach from both sides toward the center to have the highlight in the middle. For the ribbons, I make them gradually lighter toward the ends. For the Christmas ornaments and candies, I've made a rough plan and thought of 4 color combinations, assigning them to the objects. I've also noted down a color for each of the small pieces of jewelry the mice are wearing. For the color combinations, I've also written down whether I'm combining them with gold or silver. I'm starting with a pink color combination, for which I'm using purple light, Bengal rose deep, azalea pink, and pink bloom. I didn't plan in advance exactly how I would color each ornament, but I decide as I go. I start with the darkest color because I want the object to look round, so it gets gradually lighter from the edges towards the center. At this point, I can already say that the Castle Arts gold pencils work really well in this book. They are great to color with and cover the white of the paper nicely. I would almost say I prefer them in this book over the soft touch pencils. However, I'm somewhat limited with the 72 set compared to the 120 set of the soft touch. As an additional color, I'm now using both a golden gel pen and my gold combination for the bows, but I'm leaving out the lightest shade. When selecting a page, I sometimes plan the entire color palette in advance, but other times, like in this case, I develop it step by step during the process. That means I start with the obvious elements, such as the green pine branches and the red and white striped candy canes. Of course, you could color these items in any other color, but I prefer a realistic look. Then I see how I can reuse colors I've already applied elsewhere and pick additional shades to complement them. By the way, the gold gel pen I'm using is a Pentel Hybrid gel pen. In some areas I even color over the black lines. I did this with the first 2 bows and I'm doing it again with the third one. This not only helps mask spots where the background color overlapped onto the bow, but also adds a slight glitter effect. And when better to add gold, silver and glitter than at Christmas? I'm not sure how well you can see it now, but I'll show the page up close at the end so you can fully appreciate the glitter and shimmer. For the string, I'm using this brown gel pen from the Avec gel pen set. These pens probably aren't light fast, though honestly I don't know if more expensive gel pens are necessarily light fast either. However, considering the price, these pens are really good and perform just as well as the Pentel Hybrid. This ornament is now complete, and I'm briefly checking my plan to see where else I'll be using this color combination. I've arranged the colors so that no 2 ornaments or candies with the same colors are next to each other. I'd start with the candy on the right to give the gel pen on the ornament time to dry, avoiding smudging it with my hand. Again, I'm using the gold gel pen and the brown glitter gel pen. Now I'm coloring the last candy in this color combination. Next up is the following color combination: purple tones. For this I'm using heather purple as the darkest shade, then purple lake and mauve as the lightest shade. A little tip for gel pens: if they are not writing well, it can help to unscrew it, remove the mine and blow firmly into the back end. Be careful not to blow too hard, as ink might come out the front. I've never had that happen, but better safe than sorry. Blowing into the mine of the pen pushes the ink toward the tip, and usually the ink flow improves significantly afterwards. I've now colored this ornament in purple, but I don't want to fill everything else left in silver. So I also use a metallic purple, but I'm starting with silver. Under poor lighting, both the silver and metallic purple appear quite dark, but with proper lighting they look much brighter. To add some lighter tones, I'm using a gray combination with colored pencils: charcoal gray, dove gray, and titanium white. I'm quite pleased with the result so far. Looking back at my rough plan, I see that the next element to be colored is the middle star, which will also be purple. Since the star doesn't have to be rounded shaped, I have more options for coloring it. I can create a gradient from dark to light on one section, and then start with a darker color again on the adjacent section, where it meets the lighter area. I've also decided to add more colors using these two glitter gel pens. But the pink turned out to be too bright, so I went over it with metallic purple. It looks fairly similar now, but again, with better lighting or a better angle, you can see the difference. Alright, let's move on to the next color combination, which is blue. This consists of ultramarine, ultramarine light, cerulean blue, and cerulean blue middle. For the small areas, I only use 2 or 3 colors from the combination, creating 2 different blue combinations. Here I'm again using a silver gel pen. And additionally, I'm using a blue glitter gel pen. I'll color all the strings at once, then focus on the second star as well as the upper candy, which will also be blue. We are slowly approaching the end, at least as far as the colored pencils are concerned. Moving on to the final color combination, consisting of cadmium green, leaf green deep, green pale, and leaf green light. I'm combining this with gold. Here as well, I use my colored pencil combination for the larger golden areas and a gel pen for the smaller ones. The last candy will also get a green wrapper. Now the only thing left is the mice jewelry. I'm coloring the stone down here purple, and for the chain and the setting I use gold. I color the Grace mouse jewelry with my gold combination and the spotted mouse jewelry with the red combination of the candy canes, with the setting also in gold. Since I already had the gold gel pen in my hand, I colored all the stars in the background gold as well. And I use a white gel pen from Sakura for all the small dots. Of course, coloring a double page always takes longer than a single page, but this one took quite some time, due to all the details. Do you sometimes check the clock to see how long you spent on a page? Or do you not care about that at all? For those who are interested, I can already say that I spent almost exactly 10 hours on this double page in the end. It might be a bit nerdy to track how long you spent on a page, but for example, last month I colored 2 pages in the astrology coloring book by Anna Jaren. Both pages took quite a while, and when I checked my coloring planner, I noticed that this had been the case with other pages in that book as well. This means that in the future I'll plan more time for such a page. Conversely, if you know that pages in certain books are quicker to color, you can always fit them in between other projects. Of course, you don't necessarily have to time it, but sometimes you forget how long you spent on a page if it was a while ago. In addition to the dots in the background, I also used the gel pen for some highlights on the candies, ornaments and bows. Now that the entire page is colored, the background is less of a focal point, but I'm still not completely satisfied with it. Perhaps that's just because we tend to be more critical of our own work. I think it would have looked better if I had either left out the circles completely or added significantly more of them. But that's how it is. Not every page turned out perfectly, and you can learn from it to improve next time. If I would have a different color that matches better than the light blue, it probably would have looked better. Overall, I find the upper section more successful than the lower part. Probably because the lower area is very light, and the viewer's gaze naturally moves from dark to light. But there's nothing particularly focal down there, and it would have been better if the attention was drawn to the main subject. That's why I tried to darken the area a bit by going over the light blue with the darkest green shade. I definitely like it a bit better now, that it's somewhat darker, but due to the different texture, it still distracts a little from the actual motif. I also considered simply painting over the entire background with acrylic paint, but in the end I decided it wasn't worth the effort. The next day, I took another look at the page and added another layer of the light green on top. Actually, I dabbed rather than brushed, because when I tried to paint, more of the original color underneath lifted up, the new color was applied, so I had to dab. This has improved it a bit more for me, but I'm still not completely satisfied. But as I said, not every page can be perfect in the end. Now I show you the page up close with all the glitter and shimmer. What I'll definitely be doing more often in the future are the color splatters with metallic watercolors. I really like how those turned out. I hope the video was entertaining for you and you could learn something from it to do better than I did. A quick update on the editing process. I couldn't resist and made another bouquet background, this time with colored pencils and in a smaller format. I like this background much better. Next week there will be an additional video where I show you how I colored this background. Bye and see you next time.